Well, welcome everybody to Mahabba, or part of Mahabba in UK. This is just four of us, and we're going to be introducing Mahabba to you at the Diaspora Peoples of Europe. And my job is to just introduce people who are going to be speaking, and hopefully we're going to give you a bit of an idea of what Mahabba does. So I elicited the help of my friend, Mullah Nasruddin, who is well known in the Muslim world. And I thought I'd tell you a story just to give you a flavor of what we do. So one day, Mullah Nasruddin is invited to the mosque to preach. And he gets up and he says to the people, "Do you know what I'm going to talk about today?" And the people say, "No." He says, "You foolish people, if you don't even know what I'm going to talk about today, what can I teach you?" And he left. And the next week he's up in the mosque to preach, and he asks again, "Do you know what I'm going to talk about today?" And the people say, "Yes." He says, "Well, if you already know, there's nothing I can tell you." And he left. So the third week, when he gets up to preach in the mosque, the people are ready. And he says, "Do you know what I'm going to talk about today?" And half of them say yes, and half of them say no. He says, "Well, those of you who know, and they'll tell those of you who don't," and then he left. So I wonder if you know what I'm going to talk about today, or we're going to talk about today. And there's a sense, I love that story because it encapsulates so much of Mahabba. Mahabba's about sharing, ordinary people sharing. It's not about a few knowing everything and telling people what they should be doing or sharing about how to engage with Muslims in that way, but it's about us, all of us, sharing our knowledge together. And that's why we've got different people today to come and talk about Mahabba. And those of us who know, or those of you who know, can tell those of you who don't. And hopefully at the end of this, you'll get some idea of what Mahabba is all about. But primarily, since Mahabba started back in 2006 in Oxford, it started as a prayer movement, and the engine, the driver, the foundation has been prayer for Muslims. And in fact, it's very much I don't know if it's a myth, but it's certainly a story within Mahabba that it's nothing really happened in the first 2 years. It was almost as if we were just digging the foundations, and then things started to happen. So the foundation is prayer. And in a recent update, I think it was back in June actually, but we put a bit of a story out about prayer, and I thought I'd read some of it. It's about a group that started in 2018. He says, and they decided to come together. By the time we started, we had 4 Iranian Christian asylum seekers in our church. We were anxious to join any ministry that worked with believers from a Muslim background. And they shared the experience of the first meeting they had became much more than they anticipated. It involved testimony, singing, food, prayer. And then it involved people coming together and praying for Syrians, Iranians, Kurds, and singing in an Arabic, Farsi, TV, and food. And it just became a hive of activity. And they started to run weekly Bible studies, one for beginners from Mark's Gospel, the other for people who'd been with them for a year from Genesis. And they started by coming together to pray, but they very quickly became a little movement themselves. And then he wrote this during lockdown and said, they've managed to master Zoom, and prayer has started to take off in a different way. And I think that's been our experience very much, that during this lockdown period, we've gone back to our basics, gone back to the prayer, gone back to sharing with one another virtually. And we do a number of things to pray. Every year we do the 30 days of prayer during Ramadan with a campaign we call Love Fast, which is prayer in action. We have a Friday Juma prayer, Friday at 12, where we call the network to pray. And we also, on the third Thursday of the month, we have a network-wide call it's on top of all the other calls that are hosted by groups. I think Zoom's been quite a boom for prayer in the network, and that's been really, really encouraging. I'm actually going to hand over now to Alex, who's one of our trustees, and he will share something of his own experience of Mahabba.
Hey everybody, I'm Alex Garcia, and I currently live in London. And it's both a pleasure and a joy to talk about Mahabba. Mahabba is actually that thermostat that raises the temperature for passion for Muslim people in a local area. Being a missionary, being involved with missions for years, I always saw this huge disconnect between professional Christians or trained missionaries or people that came from a Muslim background and seeing them as the ones carrying the flag and pushing the mission. And the original vision of Mahabba is passing that knowledge to the local church, is getting the hand of the Muslim community and getting the hand of the local church and bringing them together to say, why can we be friends? And teaching specifically the church that is actually much easier than we thought. If I can define Mahabba and the impact of Mahabba into 3 simple words, I'll start with prayer. Mahabba doesn't come in inviting churches to burn with passion for Muslim people, because we understand that passion comes from prayer. So inviting people to pray, and as we pray, breaking down walls of prejudice, breaking down walls of fear, breaking down walls of even wrong theology or missiology. And the result of that is amazing. As people pray, guess what happens? The Lord raises the temperature of passion. And you see passion, newfound passion for Muslim communities breaking in within the church. But I told you I was going to give you 3 words. If the first one is prayer, if the second one is passion, the third one is people. Therefore, people burning with passion, fueled by this movement of prayer, they can engage with people. You see, the exciting thing about Mahabba is that it offers the local church not only a space to pray, but also how to pray. And as the needs come, why? Because when we pray, we believe God will be answering prayers, to teach the churches, to train the churches how to better engage people. So my 3 key words is prayer, passion, and people. You might ask, why does that excite me as a missionary? Because it reproduces, it manifests the Great Commission in places where I do not have access to. As we understand that a basis of grace and truth through relationship and daily living and people just knowing that there's a church in the neighborhood that is praying for that community, that is embracing the Muslim community in that region. So for us, it's the manifestation of the heart of the Father for Muslims all over the place through the local church as his embassy. So for me, Mahabba is extremely exciting, and it takes the Great Commission to where the Great Commission should be, from the local church to the local community, from prayer until passion rises, until people are engaged with the grace and love of the Lord Jesus Christ and the truth that he's the only way to the Father.
Thank you, Alex. It's really great to hear from you. We're going to turn now to Steve, who will be presenting a little bit on grace and truth.
Hi everyone, Steve here, and it's weird because I know I'll be sitting at home watching this with you when it goes out as part of the gathering. So this talk is ministry with grace and truth, and I want to unpack in just about 10 minutes something of the breadth of what this means. So Jesus, the Word, became flesh, or enfleshed in humanity, in John chapter 1:14. So gospel witness, Christly witness, is incarnational. He wrapped it in himself, and the Lord wants to wrap the gospel wrap us in the gospel, and we become living representation to people. Secondly, Jesus made his home among us. Gospel witnesses has proximity. No good just shouting across the road like they do in Kenya, shouting at the Muslims, from the church on one side to the mosque on the other, and no matter how true what you're saying is, proximity is needed. So incarnation, proximity. Thirdly, Jesus was in closest relationship with the Father. Gospel witness is relational. And then fourthly, Jesus made the Father known. Gospel witness is making God understandable. And that's our approach, the Grace and Truth style, the Grace and Truth disposition, is to hit all those things. Incarnate the gospel, incarnate Jesus, be proximal, be in proximity, rub shoulders with Muslims after lockdown. Be relational. It's out of relationship, and the bridges of relationship, the stronger the bridge, the more theological hardware can cross that bridge without the bridge buckling under the weight of it. And then we need to, it's about helping them understand. That's a patient, long-haul job sometimes. Next slide, Q5. Jesus modeled whole life witness, including words, but he also modeled the words by application. So you've got this whole life thing of not just verbal proclamation, which many of us evangelicals get kind of hung up on, that it's not happened until that's happened, but Jesus blended word with work. So good works, diaconal, being a deacon, serving people, and wonders. So word, work, and wonders. Wonders being prayer, supernatural intervention, when things, and often the needs of folk from Muslim families have a spiritual dimension. And they're wide open, of course, to prayer for all sorts of issues. And it's refreshing for them to see a Christian that would do that and pray with them. Where are we? Next slide, number Q6. Bishop Tom Wright says, if the Word became flesh in John chapter 1, we must be careful not to turn that flesh back into word. And that is so well put. So it's got to be more than mere words. It's words and. Q7. Grace and Truth holds in creative tension the great command of Christ to love, grace, and the great commission of Christ to reach with a message, truth. So they are like railway lines, the great command, the great commission, and they're needed together for Christly witness. And lastly, Q8, Grace and Truth is ethical when it says, I'm not your friend, so you will follow Jesus, but I want you to follow Jesus because I'm your friend. But even if you don't follow Jesus, I'll still be your friend.
Right, handing over to Chaz, who will tell us. Chaz is based in London. Tell us what's going on there.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Steve, for sharing that. And that's very much the ethos of Mahabba, is that we want to approach sharing faith with Muslims with grace and with truth. And we have different facilitators across the country to help the coordinators in their role in doing that. And I facilitate for London. And I just want to share briefly how some of the Mahabba groups have begun. And generally speaking, as I thought through the 10 groups that we have in London, they've all started because they had the motivation and the desire to pray. Some were praying already for Muslims, just out of their own vision and desire. And then they connected with Mahabba because they wanted to be part of something bigger across the country, where they could be part of a network, where they can share vision, resources, and encouragement together, gain ideas, try new things. And so that's what the Mahabba network is. As those Mahabba groups have been meeting to pray in London, different things have developed and grown from that. And we don't stipulate you must develop this, but rather it just springs up out of their own prayer life and relationships in the context of their location. Each of the London boroughs has been quite different from each other. Altogether, we have 33 boroughs, and we just have 10 prayer groups at the moment, but we'd love to have one in every borough. But within those groups, as they pray in those boroughs, we've seen meetings for better understanding develop in some boroughs. We've also seen outreach of various kinds. I'll just give you one example from where we are in Croydon, that after a number of meetings for better understanding, which we'd had with the local Ahmadiyya mosque, we thought, well, why don't we put on our own event and invite them to it, just like they'd put on their events and invited us at Eid, and we'd attended and been at those. So we put on what we call a hope event. What we do is we always start with a meal, because that really breaks the ice. And in fact, before that, we start with creating a pool of contacts. And we've done that through years of prayer, of making friendships. And then from that group of friends that we've formed through visiting them in different contexts, we then say, come to our hope event, where we lay on a lovely curry meal. That takes a good hour, so it's very relaxed, informal, and people then willing to listen to something. And then we share a short program, which has included worship, sorry, not worship, a couple of songs, more of a sort of solo item to just something not too overtly Christian, but something that lifts their eyes onto God who cares for us and loves us. Then we have a short story from somebody of how God has impacted their life. And then sometimes we've had a drama, and sometimes a talk specifically on a Christian topic. And afterwards, we invite people, if they'd like prayer, to receive prayer, either from the front, where one person is praying and they can all just receive silently without any indication, or if they wish to come to a banner that we have at the front saying healing on that banner. And we found that when we've put on these events, on average, we've had about 80 people attend, half of those being from other faith backgrounds, then from mixed faith backgrounds, so some are Hindus as well as Muslims, so that means it's less, they don't feel targeted as such. But we've had Muslims coming forward for prayer. One lady, she was going to come to the event, but she fell down the stairs and badly injured her foot. So she had to go to A&E instead. But after she'd been to A&E and they'd assessed it and said that she got a sprain, there was very bad bruising there, she said, I want to come and get prayer from the Hope event. So she arrived just at the end of the Hope event, asked for prayer, and she immediately, she felt the pain went. She was walking on her foot, the bruising went away, and she was just amazed. She was in tears, and she was saying, why has this happened? And the people praying for her just said, it's because God loves you. And she was so touched, so amazed. It was incredible. She's still on a journey. She hasn't become a follower of Jesus at this point, but she was deeply touched. So these are some of the things that have grown from prayer, and we could give you other stories of some other amazing things like that happening. And what do we do once people start showing interest? Well, we've got 3 resources that we'd like to mention to you briefly. The first one is called Friendship First. And as we've said, for most people who come to faith in Jesus, it's because they've heard at least a portion of the gospel. They've been touched supernaturally in some way by God. And they have a friend who's been there long term, loving them, helping them through their questions and doubts. And so we have a course called Friendship First, which helps Christians to understand that we need to build a long-term platform which is showing loving Christian friendship towards the Muslim, which is a basis for them to ask questions and explore the Christian faith over a period of time. So that's our Friendship First course. The second course we have is once people have come to faith, maybe they come to your church because they've become a Christian recently, which has happened to us with some Iranians, is we have a Come Follow Me course. And the Come Follow Me course is written specifically for Muslims. The illustrations are recognized by Muslims, the stories are recognized by Muslims. And one person I've taken through the course, on numerous times through the course, he said, "That's me, that's written for me, they know my story." And that's so helpful in the context of discipleship. The third course we have is joining the family. And that's really helping churches to understand the price that people who choose to follow Jesus from a Muslim background will have to pay, and how we need to be more than a church on Sunday. We really need to be community. And that's joining the family, which is an excellent course put together by believers from a Muslim background. And then finally, we seek to also develop a course called, we're developing something called Sharing Your Faith and Strengthening Followers. And the aim of this is to come alongside Christians to help them share their faith in the normal context of their everyday life. This is not for people who are full-time missionaries. This is for everyday Christians who are in the workplace, in their families, in their neighborhoods, meet Muslims, and to have confidence to share faith. And once people come to faith, to how to strengthen them in their faith. And that's the call for every Christian in this country. And this is what Mahabba seeks to help those Christians to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaz. We're going to hear from Jan.
Hi, I'm Jan, and as Phil has said, I live in Bristol. I'm part of the coordinating team of Mahabba Bristol, which started 10 years ago this autumn. A few of us having visited Oxford, which was the first place where Mahabba started, and seen it in action. As soon as we saw it, we felt very inspired that actually this is something that we could do that would really help us to gather people in our city who were interested in learning about how to be friends with the Muslim people in our city, and also learning how to be friends with and share faith with those people in our city. So 10 years down the line, we have over 100 people receiving our newsletter across the city, and around 25 people who are committed to meet regularly to pray together. These 25 people are drawn from around 12 different churches, and for me that's one of the beauties of Mahabba. It's not just one church, it's people from many different churches meeting together to pray, and then being able to feed back into their own churches news and information about what God is doing. As we seek to pray for Muslim people in our city. Excuse me. We started, as I say, 10 years ago and offered 2 venues for prayer, an early morning prayer, which we were very hopeful would take off in a business area of the city and sited in probably the most evangelical church in the city. But having offered it every week for 18 months, nobody from that church came, and very, very few, if any, people came apart from those who were leading the prayer. So just to encourage you that sometimes it can be a bumpy start. So we just then focused on the lunchtime prayer, which we also ran concurrently with the morning prayer. And that continues to be lunchtime prayer every Friday, and to be the most popular prayer opportunity. For the past 2 years, we've also grown a satellite group in a suburb of Bristol. We were very touched that a couple of elderly retiree missionary ladies actually started to come to our Mahabba group in the city, and then they asked if they could start a group where they live in the suburbs. And it's wonderful really to meet with them once a month, and their group, they've gathered about 12 older people. Very few of them know a Muslim person, and yet they're very aware that as Muslim people get settled in, as migrants get settled in the city, they start to move out and out and out. And their desire is that they are praying, ready to receive Muslims in their neighborhood. So that's been a real encouragement for us. Prayer remains a very strong focus and foundation of our Mahabba in Bristol, and we focus largely on the local scene and our various engagements with Muslims in the city, whether it's project-based or with personal contacts. And in the last 5 years, it's been a joy to be praying also for newly baptized believers as they have started to come, and as they start to study the Bible and take on the faith for themselves. We have a WhatsApp support group, which is greatly valued by all of us who are part of Mahabba Bristol. It can be tough engaging with Muslim people, lots of ups and downs, lots of disappointments. So we have this WhatsApp support group, which we're available to each other anytime for questions, for prayer requests, for follow-up support for BMBs. We might get a request. I'm going to see Fatima this afternoon, and I want to follow up on the conversation I had with her last week. Please pray that the Lord will open up that opportunity and for the Holy Spirit to speak through me. And then you get lots of responses. Yes, I'm praying for you now. And that's a great encouragement for us. The other main thing that we really focused on in Mahabba Bristol is learning together. We learn together as a core group of actively engaged people, and we meet for an evening once every other month to share learning from a book that we might have read, pertinent to reaching out to Muslim people or encouraging new believers. Or we share resources that have been helpful to us. Excuse me. And then 3 times a year, we invite a well-known speaker to address the wider group of people in the city, those who receive our newsletters. And so to that evening, we might get 40, 50 people. And we try and vary the stable from which the speakers come so that it kind of meets people's needs. So, for example, we actually had the Archbishop's representative for interfaith relations come and speak to us 3 months ago, but he would attract a different crowd from someone who's from perhaps a non-conformist Bible college. But those evenings have been really popular. We've had a speaker speak for half an hour and then discussion groups on tables, and people have felt really resourced by that opportunity. Chaz has mentioned the trilogy of courses, the Friendship First, the Joining the Family, and the Come Follow Me courses, and we've done training locally in churches on all of these courses. And we also do some sort of in-house training for women, drawing on the materials from the When Women Speak course. There are, so we have prayer and learning together, and then we have volunteer opportunities in English classes that we hold for migrant communities, and people get drawn into to volunteering in those ways. Toddler and carer groups, craft groups, or cooking club. And out of the cooking club, it was out of the cooking club perhaps 7 years ago, I think now, that a dialogue tool called the Prophet Stories was developed locally. And now this tool is used nationally, and with Zoom and Zoom training possible around the world, it's been great to see it being taught internationally as well. And I believe now we're going to be seeing a video about that.
I love kind of affirming everything that we have together with women of faith who are just like myself.
It doesn't matter if it's Christian and Muslim, they are all human beings.
People just started to ask each other, what do you do in Christianity when somebody dies? What do you do in Islam when somebody has a baby? And there was a growing interest in people actually finding out about each other's faith, and that's really how it started.
It's just sharing our beliefs, it's just sharing our stories, what says in our religion, what says in our holy books.
If you don't spend much time learning about people of other faiths, then you just have these assumptions and presumptions about them.
People sitting in group and getting more friendship with other people. Sometimes you never know, you can help each other.
And it's really interesting, yeah.
We learn how to listen to each other, really listen without talking over each other. We learn how to sit and listen to something that we don't particularly agree with, but we will value and respect.
You obviously have to be careful. When you disagree, you have to disagree well. It's not treading on eggshells, it's just being respectful.
Respect turns to love and friendship.
We sit together, we have a cup of tea and chat.
Apart from discussing our faiths, we also sharing our personal, everyday, our daily lives things.
I love to come in this group, it's very nice.
Thank you, Jan. Excellent. So there you have it, 4 glimpses into Mahabba, little windows on the world of Mahabba. And I hope it's really come over that Mahabba is not an organization, it's a network. It's a network of groups around the country, of ordinary people, ordinary Christians who are sharing their faith and loving Muslims, and are praying, above all they're praying for their Muslim friends. And that's spread elsewhere. One of the things I have the joy of doing is liaising with groups that are growing around the world. And there are a lot of people probably out there who feel a connection with Mahabba and have started up something. And we are very informally meeting together or linking together. I do a quarterly round robin prayer letter, sharing that information. There's groups in France and Denmark and Belgium. We link with groups in Canada and in US. They're not Mahabba groups, but they're people involved with Muslims. And we're trying through that networking to grow the vision. I thought, just to finish, we'll have the mullah again. Mullah Nasruddin was one day sitting by a lake, and he was putting yogurt into the lake. And the people came and said to him, "What are you doing, mullah?" He said, "I'm adding starter to the lake in order to make more yogurt." And they said, "But you can't turn that whole lake into yogurt." He said, "I know it's impossible, but what if we succeed?" And he continues to put the yogurt in the lake. And I love that story as well. It's a bit like yeast in the dough, but that idea of changing the environment, those little actions that we do through prayer, through loving our neighbor, and seeking to change the environment. And I know it's impossible, but what if we succeed?